years, which have done very prominent sites in Australia. So please welcome them.
Thank you. So today, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. Loud and good.
Got a lot of feedback. Okay. So first off, if you have a look at that URL, you can download, you can access the presentation and all the links that I talk about. So all the links and access to the presentation, you can go to that URL, and that URL is a11yoz.com/maximize. So I'll read it out at the end as well, but it's a11yoz.com/maximize. So today I'm going to talk about basically making your site accessible. I'm going to talk very briefly at the end about how to do so when you're building a site. But basically when you have a site, you're not sure whether it's accessible or not, really what you need to do is audit the content. So these are the kind of things that should be completed in an accessibility audit. Things like all images have alt attributes, data tables have table headers, summary, caption, pages have meaningful sequence, forms have field labels, label for an ID, field set and legend. Now I don't expect you to understand what I mean by all of those terms, but what you could do is copy and paste that to and send it to developers and say, our website doesn't have these things. And if they come back and say no, then you know you have a problem. The audit will also test things like complex images having long descriptions, videos having transcripts, captions and audio descriptions, and navigation having hidden structural labels. That's a really small selection of the kind of things that you can do to audit a website, but you know they're the kind of things to look out for. Basically, when someone audits your site, it's best that they use the WCAG 2 evaluation methodology. Does everyone know what WCAG 2 is? Mm-hmm. Okay, so WCAG 2 are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They're basically what you need to follow in order to make your website accessible, and it's a legal requirement in Australia. WCAG 2 is an international set of guidelines developed by the W3C, and I spent 6 years with the W3C writing WCAG 2, and I was on the Evaluation Methodology Task Force, and these were the 5 steps for developing an audit. So first you need to define the evaluation scope. So what site are you testing? Are you going to test your shopping cart feature or your publication section, or that third-party site that looks like it's on your site but it's not really your site. So decide what it is that you're going to test and what level of accessibility compliance that you're going to test to. There are 3 levels of accessibility compliance: A, AA and AAA. AA is the medium level, and that's what you should aim for. So then you need to spend some time exploring your website and find sort of some interesting pages on your site. Anything that's not a normal page, you need to test. And the federal government says that you should test about 10% of your pages as an absolute minimum. So anything that like slideshows, image galleries, forms, videos, social media, that kind of stuff, those are the kind of things that you need to test. And then you can select a representative sample of the site and then audit the selected sample, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then report the evaluation findings. So, actually provide a report with the things that you have and haven't found. So some of the things that we have fixed recently on some websites is this is the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games website, and there's 5 options here: athletics, badminton, basketball, beach volleyball and boxing. And basketball is very bright, whereas the others are coloured out, and that's because it has keyboard focus. So that's what happens when you hover over it with the mouse, but the same thing happens when you tab to it with the keyboard. So one of the best things that you can do to see whether your site is accessible is see if you can use it using only your keyboard,
yes.
not just the mouse. Now, tabbing will take you to all interactive elements, such as links or fields and accordions and forms and videos and things like that. See if you can play a video with the keyboard. See if you can turn captions on and off with the keyboard. So this is just the next, you tap one more time, and you can see that you get beach volleyball highlighted with keyboard focus. So this is the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games website. This is another example. This is their maps, their venue maps. It's currently highlighted on 9, and the map on the right-hand side has moved so that you can see where 9, specifically the Narrane mountain bike trails, are in Queensland. And then if you go down to 12, it moves the map accordingly so that it's in the right place. So once again, that's keyboard accessibility. So anything that you see change when you hover over it with the mouse, you need to see the equivalent change when you tap to it with the keyboard. Another thing that's really important is pinch zoom, or being able to increase text size. So this is the State Library New South Wales site, which we worked very hard on. And as you can see, we can use pinch zoom quite significantly on the site. And it's really, really important. It's a really valuable accessibility feature, but it's also really important for the general population. You'd be surprised how many people use pinch zoom without actually defining themselves as having a disability. So what must an audit include? It really needs to include both manual and automated testing. If you engage in an accessibility company like ours, and they say they're going to do one or not the other, so just manual testing or just automated testing, then they're not giving you the right solution. There's a whole lot of things that can be tested automatically, but there are a whole lot of things that need to be tested manually as well, so you have to have both. What should it include? So consider asking for a list of where every error occurs. So for example, State Library New South Wales, you saw that image. We could have, in the audit, have said that image is missing an alt attribute. You need to have alt attributes on all your images, but we don't tell the client where all those images are. So with State Library New South Wales, we went that step further and we listed every location of the error so that they can go through and systematically fix it. The other thing to consider doing is user testing with people with disabilities. It's not valid to get your testers or an accessibility consultancy to test with things like NVDA and JAWS themselves unless they need it for accessing the web. It's really, really important that if you're going to test with things like JAWS and NVDA, you use someone that needs to use JAWS and NVDA for everything. Because the way that I would use JAWS is completely different to someone who is vision impaired, how they would use JAWS. So it's really important to actually do user testing with people with disabilities. And so it's not a requirement under WCAG 2, but we always find some really interesting things when we do user testing. And then of course what you have to do is actually review the fixes. So it's not enough to do an audit and then complete fixes. You then need to get that same accessibility consultancy in to make sure the fixes have been completed properly. And once accessibility compliance is confirmed, then your consultant can give you a conformance claim, and there's actually a whole bunch of rules around conformance claims, and there's a link there for you. So I just want to talk about some problem areas. So first is video. Video makes up approximately 65% of all search results. Google actually ranks a page with a video much higher than it ranks a page without a video. And that's because it assumes that someone that's gone to the trouble of creating a video has put more effort into that page, and it's therefore a more high value page. If you have a video with captions versus the same video without captions, the actual completion of the video doubles if that video has captions. And that happens because, for me personally, on Facebook when I'm waiting for a plane or waiting for a taxi, it just seems to be all the time, to tell the truth. But I never look at Facebook with audio on, because I'm often in a public place. So if a video doesn't have captions, I don't watch it. And there are some things that I'll be quite interested in and go, damn, they don't have captions. But I don't like to save it for later, to watch it later. I just go, I'm not going to watch it. Videos with transcripts earn 16% more revenue than videos without transcripts. And one of the reasons for that is because Google can actually search through transcripts, can't search through a video. And the other thing to remember is that 80% of people that actually use captions, like myself, actually don't do so for accessibility reasons. So only 20% of people who use captions actually are deaf or hard of hearing. The BBC did this study, and they called it the Broadchurch effect. So I don't know if any of you see Broadchurch. Very strong English accents. And so they found a massive spike in the, and I think it was something like 92% of people who turned on captions for Broadchurch actually weren't deaf or hard of hearing. So the Broadchurch effect. Common accessibility issues with video. Inadequate keyboard access. So see if you can play your video and do everything with the keyboard. Make it full screen, change the volume, turn on captions, etc. Often you can't do that just with the keyboard. There's also issues like inaccessible content. So, for example, in 1997, Japan released an anime series about Pokemon. And there was a particular episode that had 6 seconds of flickering and flashing content. Almost 700 people ended up hospitalised. Most of them were sent home as soon as they got to the hospital, but some of them were in hospital for up to 2 weeks, and some of them had symptoms ranging from seizures, vision loss, etc., to vomiting blood. So flickering content you really need to avoid. Flickering content can trigger epileptic attacks, but it also can trigger migraines, and I've had migraines triggered 6 times while testing videos, so that's something to be careful of as well. If your video doesn't have captions, then you're basically excluding people who are deaf or hard of hearing. If your video doesn't have audio descriptions, then you're basically excluding people who are vision impaired. Now, captions are the text at the bottom of the screen, not to be confused with subtitles. Subtitles are a direct translation of the spoken language into another language in text. So French movie, English subtitles. Captions are not just the speech, they're also the sounds that occur in the video. Audio descriptions are actually an audio commentary of what you can visually see on the screen. So obviously people who are vision impaired, they can often hear, so they also get a description of what they're missing because they can't see. So there are very, very few fully accessible video players in the world. Ours is actually one of them. We developed about 2 years ago. It's just been brought on by CCC Tech Centre, so now all Californian community colleges actually use Oz Player for their video player in all their education, and Department of Education and Training just purchased it as well. It's fully keyboard accessible, it has skip links, interactive transcript, captions, audio descriptions. You'll find there are very, very few video players that support audio descriptions, but the requirement for audio descriptions is a level W requirement, so it is something that you need to do if you have videos. And it can play YouTube and videos as well. If you are interested in Ozplayer, feel free to come talk to me, but there's also a brochure on the white table just over there. I didn't have enough for everyone's bags, so grab a brochure if you like. Okay, so another problem area is social media. So why isn't social media accessible? So this is basically the reason. About 6 months ago, I noticed that all my news feeds had HTML code in them. So here the heading says spam posts, class equals pro, end spam, why sacrifice yourself, whistleblowers. Now it's not that everyone who posted to my Facebook feed got together for a party and said, you know what, we're going to post HTML to Gian's Facebook feed. What happened is they posted just normally and Facebook changed something, and all of a sudden the HTML that they had there that wasn't showing up, all of a sudden was showing up. So, you know, Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, that kind of stuff, they picked it up within a day or two, but Crikey, which this example is from, took them a week before they realised what was happening. So the reason why social media isn't accessible is it changes so often. If it's accessible today, it doesn't mean it will be accessible tomorrow. It doesn't mean that it will be accessible in an hour. Facebook changes 5 times a day. So the other thing is that Facebook doesn't have, and none of the social networks have a standardised accessibility testing process. Often what they do, and this is what Facebook does, is they release their updates to their staff. And their staff log bugs, and they fix the bugs, and then after 3 days, they release it to the general population. Now, if none of their staff have disabilities, if none of their staff use screen readers, or rely only on the keyboard, or use Dragon naturally speaking, then they're not going to know that those features work with those systems. Sorry, just one of the ways to address that, just forgot to tell you the important part, is that you need to replicate your social media feeds on your site. So if you tweet out, make sure you have a page that has all your tweets. If you put out a post to Facebook, make sure you have a page that has all your posts. You don't need to replicate your feed, you need to replicate what you put out. And also consider putting out content to more than one social network, because some social networks are more accessible to different groups than others. And of them, Twitter is the most accessible. The last problem area I'm going to talk about is slideshows. So these are the moving banners that you see on the front page and the home page. We've actually developed an accessible slideshow. It was commissioned by the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and they have very kindly released it under Creative Commons. So that means that you can grab this code and you can use it on your own site. It has a Drupal module and a WordPress plugin. So feel free just to send that URL, and as I said, it's on the link that I'll give you at the end, to your developers, and they can implement it. It has accessibility features such as a pause button, skip links, alt attributes, it's fully keyboard accessible, and it's very friendly to screen reader users. And the last thing to remember is that accessibility is an ongoing project. It's not a let's fund it for 2 months and then we're going to forget about it. It's something that you have to do all the time. You need to make accessibility an accepted part of the content publication process, so conduct 6 monthly audits of content. Conduct regular training. You might conduct training for your content orders this year, but there'll be staff changes. You really need to budget for running that training once a year. Update policies as required. So when you're going to procure a web application or a mobile app, or you're going to get someone to build a mobile app for you, make sure that you actually specify accessibility requirements in the contract before they sign it. So that way, if anyone does make a mistake, you are liable. But it's also quite useful to engage an independent consultant to say, okay, we're rebuilding our site. We're going to get an independent consultant to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So what we do when, and this is what we do with State Library New South Wales, is we review the designs, we review the templates, we train the developers, we train the content authors, and then we do the final site audit. And they're making the fixes now, and then we're going to do another retest, and then the site will be fully accessible. So yes, it's more work for the accessibility agency, but it means that there's a lot less development work and fixes and kind of redoing stuff at the end. So we did a similar project with the City of Melbourne probably about 4 years ago, and they just engaged us to review the designs and to do a 2-hour training session for their developers. And at the end of the site, when it was launched, we did an audit, and they estimated that it would be 2 years worth of work to fix the issues that they had. So they decided that they would just engage us the next time that they rebuilt the site, which they did. And it was a very large project because it was, a very large site with very complex functionality. And they actually spent about $50,000 to $60,000 with us. But at the end, when we did that final site audit, and it was an agile methodology, so we can operate with that as well, they estimated it was about 3 weeks worth of fixes. So there's a massive difference in that. And certainly if you're talking about a small site, that was a large site, very, lots of 3,000 pages, then, the cost is significantly less. So, it's something that, yes, you do spend more money with the independent consultant, but it means that your site actually is accessible at the end. Now, I just have some more information for you. There are these great things, the accessibility fact sheets, and I have 2 copies of the video fact sheets here to give away. We have fact sheets on images, content, keyboard, PDF, HTML5, coding, forms, source order, video, JavaScript, tables, and interactive maps. They were all commissioned by the Bureau of Meteorology, and they're available under Creative Commons attribution license. So you can do what the United Nations did, which is download all of them, repurpose them as they saw fit, and then just make sure they attribute it to the Bureau of Meteorology. Each fact sheet has a section on impact on users, accessibility principles, a section called the manager checklist, which is basically a tester checklist, and a developer checklist, which has correct and incorrect code. The JavaScript fact sheet also has live demos and code examples of things like sliders, accessible JavaScript sliders, and progress meters and things like that. As I said, I've got 2 video fact sheets to give out at the end, so see if you can remember what I have to say about the videos. I've also got a whole bunch of articles. We've got articles on the AccessibilityOz website if you're interested in any of these topics. Mobile accessibility, accessibility during the build of a website, interactive maps and accessibility, design and accessibility, capture, slideshows, video, links, images, tables and forms, and WCAG 2. And that URL again, which has all those links, is a11yoz.com/maximize. So now for the prizes. I can't go too far, I'm touched. Let's not do that at all. Okay, can anyone tell me one of the requirements for accessible video? Very good. And you at the back there?
Audio description.
Very good, excellent. Well, thank you very much. I hope that was helpful. I'll be here for lunch, so let me know if you have any questions.
I do have a question.
Oh, yes?
So we talked a little bit about